We realize that survivors have an extraordinary amount of problem-solving ability and grit just to be survivors. And that's one of the most successful indicators of who's going to be a successful software engineer.
Hi, my name is Nancy Hardcastle. I'm a speech coach, and my mission is to help public speakers stand up, be great, and create radical change in the world. I specialize in equipping human trafficking survivors and their allies, which is why I'm talking today to Laura Hackney. Hi, Laura.
Hi there.
Laura is the co-founder of an organization called AnnieCannons. The mission of AnnieCannons is to transform survivors of human trafficking into software professionals. Thank you so much for aiming high, Laura. I love your mission.
Thank you.
So when you succeed, can you tell us what that looks like? Can you give us an example?
Absolutely. So we started AnnieCannons 3 years ago in response to hearing over and over again from survivors and survivor leaders that when they're able to get out of an exploitative situation that they're in, whether that's of their own ability to get out of that situation or through a rescue or intervention effort, there wasn't much of a what's next. They might have been able to receive support services, short-term housing, but there wasn't a meaningful way to people to reintegrate long-term. And so we decided that we were going to start an organization that focused less on sort of getting someone just from A to B, but getting someone the trajectory to have a career and to have the sort of lives that they would want to have. So an example of a success story is from our first class. We had a student who joined who had been through quite a lot, quite an ordeal, but she joined our class. She was very focused. One of the things that we found is that a lot of survivors, a lot of people want to talk to us about, the trauma that survivors have experienced, but we realize that survivors have an extraordinary amount of problem-solving ability and grit just to be survivors. And that's one of the most successful indicators of who's going to be a successful software engineer. And this person joined the class, and she doubted herself at the beginning, as all of our students do, said that she didn't think she could have any type of, career options.
And she didn't think she could do anything.
Anything, no. I mean, she had been told most of her life that the most she could do probably to just make enough money to get by would be doing hair. And that was what she told us. Okay. And we eventually are in a place now where she is a full-time software engineer. She builds mobile apps. She builds web apps. She's making over 6 figures. Yay. She's vacation. She's thinking about her life in a different way, and it's completely from the work that she's put into it and the chance that she had to show her brilliance. I would wager that most of the software engineers I meet, she could hold her own, undoubtedly. And so it's wonderful to see, and now other people in the organization look up to her, and she's helping us mentor other people. So it's incredible. It's wonderful to watch and be a part of.
Yes, that's got to be really fulfilling for you to be part of that.
Absolutely. I mean, our students surprise us every day. So it's nice to also be around people who are going through a traumatic process, but they're trying to fight their way out of thinking only about the present. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with trauma or just trying to survive, the present is all you can possibly think about. And so when people start thinking about, okay, what am I doing tomorrow? What's happening a week out? What's happening a month out? And now you have people saying, how do I build a life that I want? It's a great thing to watch.
Right. And so what do you think caused her to have the courage to say, you know what, maybe I should try this. I think I want to do this. Because that had to be a hard step for her if she thought hair was as far as she could ever get.
We have referral partners. So she was with an organization that referred her to us. And so we kind of do our best to train and support our referral partners and say, don't necessarily go up to someone and say, hey, do you want to be a coder? Because most people hear that and say, no, that's not for me, right?
I don't do drugs.
I don't, right, exactly. I don't do that thing. Or people would say, I have trouble with my email. How could I do code? Or, I don't look like Mark Zuckerberg in a hoodie. I can't code. So
Thank goodness.
right, exactly. So what we try to do is say, if you see someone who is asking what's next, who is, working through their daily life with this sort of eye for how am I going to plan for myself? How am I going to plan for my family? Where do I want to be? A lot of times that doesn't come out as, I want a career in tech, but it does come out as I want a career. I want a next step. And so we ask people to say, if there's someone like that you're working with, refer them to us. It's our job to make them think that they can make it in tech. And so for her, it was, I think, and for a lot of our students, it's wanting to step into something that's completely outside of the world of service providers, anti-trafficking. A lot of times people are saying, I've only had this identity of survivor for a long time, and I don't want that to be my only marker of identity with the people I interact with on a daily basis.
Excellent.
And so suddenly they can say, define, give me, who are you? And people can say, I'm a web developer. And that's a lot different from being, from kind of the, day-to-day not having something that I think a lot of people take for granted is having some kind of identity marker that they can use when they go out in the world. So,
right.
Yeah, she committed, and here we are.
Right. I actually hadn't thought about that. I think that's a great point of if you have an education, you can say, well, I do this particular job. This is my career. I'm a tech, or I'm a web designer, for example, or I'm a teacher. So, but if you don't have that, then yeah, it's got to be a not just difficult, but a whole shift, a mindset shift.
Absolutely, yeah. It takes some time, and I'll never forget the first time we took a group of students to a tech conference, and someone asked one of our students, what do you do? And she turned and looked at me and said, what do I say? Can I say it? And I was like, have you built a website? And she said, yeah. And I said, then you can say it. It's you're allowed. It's not exclusive. It's a skill. And then she did, and it was, you could just see the sort of change. And it's also interesting, I think, as a woman in tech, in particular for a lot of our students who are women of color, there's a tension there, and that people kind of do the, interesting.
You don't look like a tech person. Right.
Exactly. That I don't want to be there, but it is something that I think gives them another extra, like, I'm in this now, because not only am I doing it for myself, but there's sort of a bigger thing that I bring to the table, another perspective that's underrepresented, that I can kind of step into now.
And did you have that challenge of convincing women that no, this isn't a men's only field, and yes, you can definitely succeed in this field?
Yes. Every class that we've had, I think the first, maybe as equally important as the material we're covering, is getting people used to the idea that they can succeed in this. Because a lot of people ask us, and I think assume that the biggest barrier that we have is trauma, that people are going to experience trauma in the classroom or in the workplace, which does happen. But the even bigger barrier is people doubting themselves and or doing well and thinking, okay, when is it going to shift? When am I going to stop doing well? Oh, wow. And so there's a lot of, I think, society imposed self-doubt that we really have to unpack and to work through. And it affects everyone. I mean, it affects everyone. And so it's something that I think is a nice equalizer amongst our students, because instead of saying, how is your trauma affecting your work? It's more of how are you creating barriers for yourself? And that's something that we all do.
Right. How are your thoughts limiting what you can actually do?
Exactly. Yeah.
So perhaps we can back up a little bit. And I know at the beginning you started saying, we saw this need and we So we set up this organization. Can you fill in some of the gaps there of what it looks like and who works there and who are your students?
Sure, absolutely. So we actually, when I talk about AnnieCannons to people, I lead with we're a business, we're a software company that employs all of its engineers, and we train them in-house, and they all happen to be human trafficking survivors. What we find important is the fact that we are running a company. So because a lot of people ask us, okay, once you've trained someone, then do they go find work? Like, well, how do they find work? And we realized very early on that we couldn't just train people and then say, okay, now go apply for a job at Google or some big tech company, because there are a lot of barriers. There are barriers that are unique to the individuals we work with, such as arrest records. For some of our students, their exploiters are still taking public transportation. So even getting to work regularly is challenging. Then you have barriers that a lot of people experience: childcare needs, discrimination, hierarchical work models, those types of things. And so we knew that we couldn't just do the training. So we decided that we would create a company that would then, as the students are learning, as they increase their skills over time, they can then qualify for more and more complex work projects. So starting off when they just start the class and they've gone through the core digital literacy training, so about 6 weeks of everything you need to know about how to use the computer, how to use G Suite, how the internet works, the software development lifecycle, all the things that we kind of consider it the privilege gap of what you would have learned if you'd grown up in a house with two engineering parents. And then after that 6 weeks, students can qualify to start doing data entry work and software testing work and data management. And then they go through the rest of the training, which is another about 5 months, and that's front-end web development. So they learn how to the languages that they need to know to build websites. And so then they can qualify to start building websites for clients. And then they can continue on taking advanced workshops in more advanced back-end languages, databases. We have people who are interested in visual design, project management. So after they go through the core initial two phases, then they can tailor their learning to what they're interested in.
So can I jump in here for a second? So if we could compare it to something like a university degree, those first two sections would be something like general ed.
Exactly.
That are like the basic and everybody's got to take them. And then you declare your major, and so that would be in your case that you're narrowing into one area of coding or another.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And sometimes we use the analogy of like med school in a teaching hospital. So you're learning for a while and you're just focused on your learning, but then you're learning and you're practicing and you're working with your attending to build things, but to do things in real time. And then eventually you are working in the hospital. And so that's sort of how we envision that process running. And so our goal as an organization is to continue running classes, but more importantly, to expand our business so that we have more and more developers who are working the number of hours and on the types of projects that they choose. We suspect that some people may, after a couple years of building up their portfolio, say, I want to go try it at a tech company. That's awesome. We fully support that. A lot of companies still have the mandatory 4-year computer science degree requirement.
Okay.
It's getting better. Not all have it.
Is it getting better because there's more boot camps?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Camps, and I think more people are realizing that there are lots of paths to tech now. I mean, you can learn so much with the materials that exist online. And that it's becoming a little bit more open, but it's definitely still a barrier. It would definitely be something that having a big and rich portfolio would help out if you're in an interview, if you're having to go through, a technical whiteboarding interview where you're writing algorithms that,
So is that a real thing? Like you go to an interview and they say, write this algorithm? They would ask you to write an algorithm, which would be, this is what you need to write in order to make this thing work in a certain way. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So imagine you get asked a problem and then you have to walk through all of the steps in real time, writing out either in plain English and then eventually in an actual coding language or just directly in that coding language to solve a particular problem.
So they're essentially
Uh,
asking you in the interview to prove that you have that specific skill.
exactly, exactly. And so for us, we know the skills that our students have through the course because they're doing assignments. They're doing quizzes, although we call them knowledge parties instead of quizzes.
So you get to
Uh,
celebrate when you get a high grade.
it's yeah. So that piece of it for us is not the best indicator of whether or not someone can actually build the thing they've been asked to build, because it's terrifying, and sometimes the algorithms are things that prove that you might have taken a CS theory course, but that you might not be able to know the ins and outs or practicalities of how to actually build something that's useful for the company. So it's a little bit.
That's interesting. So maybe it's too theoretical.
Yeah. Some people consider it to be kind of like a hazing ritual of sorts. I know. But I do think a lot of companies have tried to move away from this. For us, it was just one more barrier. So the option's always open for students if they want to be trained on those types of interviews and how to write a resume and cover letter and all of that. But we haven't had a student actually leave, become a contractor working for us and want to leave because of the reasons that we're a different workplace model than other tech companies.
And this was something that I had wanted you to talk about at some point, so you might as well go for it. What is your workplace model?
Yeah, so we have projects that come in. So clients hire us, whether they're other tech companies, startups, larger corporations, nonprofits. They contract with AnnieCannons as an organization, and then we subcontract with our students, I should say, at that point, graduates. So they never have to work directly with a client if they don't want to. Some of our students want to learn more about the sort of sales, business development side of what we do, which is great. But for a lot of our contractors, they work solely on writing code and building things for clients. And so our workplace, we allow people to, any project that comes in, we have a process of, who's qualified, what their bandwidth is, how recently they've been rotated in on a project. And then they receive an email saying, here's sort of the outline of what the project's going to look like. Do you accept? So there's flexibility around people accepting projects. If people want to work 70 hours a week, 30 hours a week, it's completely up to them. Another thing is having childcare on site in the office. If people do want to come into the office and work, they're of course more than welcome to, and we provide childcare. And then we have lots of standing meetings, all hands meetings that everyone is invited to. So whether it's myself or my co-founder or project managers speaking, we have the kind of environment where anyone is welcome to contribute.
So if I can think of the organization kind of as in an umbrella sense, so under this umbrella is the educational portion where you're teaching students, and then another part of this umbrella is the work that you are receiving outside and that you're perhaps, what's the word? I can't think of the word where you're having your graduates do that work, subcontracting.
Exactly. Yeah, we've been using, I think, the language of training and classroom and students, but really it's a job training program.
Okay.
It's an extended, you're brought in to, you go through, we have a screening mechanism when we accept students. If they get in, listen, if you're able to complete your qualifications, here's sort of the steps that we will take with you. And then you'll get to a point where you are a contractor and you are someone who can work as many hours you want, as many projects as you want. And it's our job to fill that client pipeline. So we're really kind of trying to move away from language around classroom and student and all that kind of, just to give people the sense that this is different from school in that you're training to work in a company. And if you decide not to work with this company, you'll be able to take those skills somewhere else. But for the most part, like I said, we've had pretty much everyone stay on board.
And so when the students graduate, the option is to either continue working for AnnieCannons or to go out and I'm wondering if there's two options. One would be to contract themselves out, and then the second one would be to work for another company. Is that the case?
Correct. Yes. So they either stay working as a contractor for AnnieCannons, or they can go and apply for a tech company job that we help with. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Definitely.
okay.
I think we've we haven't had anyone who's wanted to do that yet, because of the fact that a lot of the clients we get, they want a certain type of tech product, whether it's a website, a web app, a mobile app, and usually they have an idea of what they want, but the process of going through the user experience design, the visual design process, project management process, it's just a lot. And so we have staff members who
Okay.
manage that process.
All right.
In the future, I could see if we had a graduate, a contractor who said, someone's come to me and they want to hire me to do edits to their website. I'm perfectly capable of doing that. Then they should. Absolutely. It's more of a logistics of them setting up their own, solo practice and all the kind of logistical things
Of
that,
setting
again,
up your own business.
exactly, that we just saw as one more barrier. We do a full kind of financial literacy training of how to be an independent contractor. What happens when you get a 1099 from AnnieCannons and all that kind of stuff. So I think that is a possibility. Another thing that we are really excited about is throughout the course of the initial training, we have students come up with their own software ideas. So we talk about problems they've seen in their own lives or their communities, and then if tech could maybe solve a piece of it. We don't believe that tech can solve everything, but what's a piece that software might be able to solve? And the students ideate those projects. They come up with the user stories, the user personas, they build the wireframes, they kind of really learn about the software lifecycle through that product-based learning. And
I
then
wanted to, sorry, if I could just kind of step back just a little bit because I was really interested in this piece of it. So what you're saying is that let's say you have a trainee from Oakland that has experienced all kinds of things in their neighborhood or seen things as well, and then you say, okay, what can you think of to create that might address some of these problems in your community? Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and so could you give some kind of example of a trainee that's made something that was helpful?
Absolutely. So we have, at the moment, we have about 4 different products that are in various stages of development that have all been ideas that our students have come up with themselves. In our very first class, we had a student who was frustrated with the underreporting of sexual assault for so many reasons. So she built a web application that allowed individuals to go onto the platform and anonymously give data about what happened to them.
Oh, wow.
So that way she could visualize, she could create a data visualization on a map to kind of show what was happening. But then more importantly, well, 2 things came out of that. One is that individuals who had never told their story before felt like they did in a space that was safe because we're not tracking anything about them as users.
Sure.
And the second thing is that she's now able to analyze data. It's anonymous data, but that can be aggregated and can be used to find, where certain things are happening. And right now we're in a refactor of that application.
What
So
does
we
that
have,
mean, a refactor?
yeah, so the first version is live. You can go to it. It's survivors.io, and
Okay, I'm
it's
gonna write this
still
down.
online. But right now we had a designer work on redesigning it, and she's building a newer version that's using newer technology and has a sort of better user experience. So hopefully that's going to be launching in the next month or 2. We have another student project that I'm really excited about. It's called Easy TRO. TRO stands for Temporary Restraining Order. So this student was, in the Bay Area, having to go through the restraining order process, and the forms to fill out are unbelievably complicated. We had several rounds of attorneys, in family law at the DA's office just come in and they were all just like, yeah, it's incredibly confusing and daunting.
So even with attorneys helping her, they were struggling.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, it's a process that, not only seems to require a legal degree, but it requires a tremendous amount of understanding of a system that even as someone who's feels relatively fluent in what's happening with local government, it's still, this morass of things that you have to do, be prepared for. There are pitfalls. There are all these different things that are just, and for someone who may have just gotten to a point of relative safety in her life, it's very, very daunting.
Absolutely.
So she created the idea to have an application that helps with two things. One, to sort of act like a what to expect when you're expecting, right? So what happens when you fill out this form?
Brace yourself. Oh my gosh.
What's coming after you fill out the form? What's going to happen next? What should you expect from the court? How do you serve? All of these different things to just get someone in the mindset of explaining, this is what's different about a civil and a criminal restraining order. This is how they operate. This is what it looks like. If you have children, this is what you need to know about, the custody issues that you're going to probably have coming around the corner if it was with an intimate partner. So a lot of just giving people really important information in a very easily digestible way.
So great.
And the second thing was taking the TRO form that's also in advanced legalese and making it so that a user, so this is a mobile app where you can easily fill out the form in a nice, user-friendly way using plain language. And then we on the back end take your responses and autofill it into the PDF and then email you the copy. So all you have to do is print it out and take
your PDF is like the official form that they need to fill out.
Correct.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and ideally in the future, there will be a court that will allow us to automatically send it to the county clerk from the app. It's a tangly web at the moment, but hopefully we'll be able to do that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so those are the types of things. And then we've had lots of other students come up with ideas that one of the things that we like to do is that sometimes students are able to build out a small prototype of their idea actually in class. Mm-hmm. But for some of these bigger projects, we go out and we source funding for it. So we are able to bring in our students, are at that point graduates, and actually hire them to build out the project that they're working on. So another one of those is an application that's being built right now by two of our contractors. And it's a way to allow registered voters to go onto an application and find and rank ideals and things that they believe in. Underneath that, it lists policies, and they can check off the policies they agree with. And then on the other side of the application, there's a second user group, which are candidates. So candidates running for local office coming in and saying, here are the 5 ideals that I agree with, ranked. Here are the policies I would support. Mm-hmm. And then the app would match people so that you're not having to rely on the R or the D next to someone's name, but that you're actually finding candidates that support the things that you do. So that's actually in development right now.
That's great. And it's sort of forcing this very simple, direct language. Do you believe you have this value or not? Do you agree with this policy or not?
Right.
Well, exactly. That's great. So we're approaching being out of time, but I wanted to go over this last couple of lines from your website that I found really powerful and let you speak to this. Excuse me. It says, we're making survivors of the worst forms of human exploitation and gender-based violence wealthy enough to demand respect, to influence politics and become entrepreneurs, to change the world from the bottom up. So going back to what we started with, a couple of ideas. One is, I so love that you're aiming high. And 2 is that we're not just saying, oh, let's help her find a job, or let's help him plug in this company and just stay there, but rather let's envision a future that not only equips the survivor, but for example, with these apps that you were talking about, also gives back to the community.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, you have for the individual the importance of of being economically independent, but I think more importantly is being heard and having a skill set and having a career. And that's something that's so tremendously important. I think that we get kind of caught up in thinking about, okay, how can we, provide a service that checks a box without really thinking about the long-term impact that it could have for an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And in the anti-trafficking space, people often say, well, you're working in long-term survivor reintegration. And we say, yes, we absolutely are, but we're also working in prevention. I mean, so many of the people that we meet when they first start the class have been in and out of shelters 5, 6, 7 times because it's this vicious cycle. If
Right.
you aren't,
Right.
helping someone, oftentimes they leave a shelter with more vulnerabilities than they had before they were exploited. And so on an individual level, it's incredibly important to think about this sort of long-term, not only impact, but this opportunity. I mean, it's a group of people that are, like I mentioned earlier, really good at problem solving and really good at seeing the world in a different way, in a way that I think most traditional tech companies don't see it. And so that's something that their own voice can have an impact. And then I think from a wider perspective, it's changing these narratives around who survivors are and what they can do and who should be in a certain industry and all of those types of things. So for us, it's really important to have, that sort of ongoing vision as we look to what we can do in this particular movement.
So if people want to support your business, support the trainees that you have there, where should they go? What should they do? And I'll be sure and put it in the notes of the video as well.
Absolutely. The first thing I would say is hire us. If you need any type of technology, whether that's data management, a website that you have and your developer left you hanging, a mobile application we plug in for as the entire engineering department for startups. So that a full range is to hire us. We are still a nonprofit. All the proceeds from the business side goes directly into our training, so donations are always welcome.
All right.
And then I think the last thing that I always leave people with is if you see messages about trafficking where it's for example, an image of a young girl with her hands bound, or it's these things that portray survivors in a way that diminishes them or re-victimizes them, question it and question how it's affecting you and think about who this group of people are. Because a lot of times, if you can imagine being judged for the rest of your life on the worst thing that happened to you, it's a pretty bad place to be. So for us, the less bias against survivors of trafficking or domestic violence or, even I think this extends to some extent to refugees and, formerly incarcerated people, the less bias that you have, the more successful we are. Because in the beginning of AnnieCannons, it was difficult to get clients to hire us because of this expectation or this ideal of who a survivor is. And now that we have this portfolio and we can say, no, we can build that, it is much easier, but we still have people say, I love what you're doing, but I need to hire a real developer. Real quote. And it's just, that's the kind of mindset that I think anyone has the power to change for themselves. And in doing that, and demanding that we don't have this sort of narrative personally or in the media, it helps everyone.
Thank you so much. It's so encouraging. I love creating the new narrative. We have to do that. So I will direct everyone to the website so they can learn more. And I really appreciate talking to you today, Laura.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.